Drake is one of the most fascinating figures in modern hip-hop precisely because he often feels like a walking paradox. In one moment, he's the smooth-talking romantic who preaches self-worth and respect, and in the next, he'll deliver a line that sounds petty, performative, or just flat-out awkward. Sometimes he presents himself as untouchable and dominant, and other times he leans into sadness, isolation, and vulnerability, like that's the real core of his artistry. Those contradictions can be part of what makes him compelling. Artists are allowed to be messy, layered, and inconsistent. But there's one contradiction that many listeners have never fully accepted. The version of Drake that tries to signal real street credibility, gang proximity, or a background of moving dangerous. For a lot of fans, Drake's strongest lane has always been melodies, emotion, and sharp, quotable rap, not the tough guy posturing. So the big question becomes, why does Drake get so much pushback for trying to sound hardened in ways that other rappers can do without the same scrutiny? And is there any path where that image could ever feel believable? To understand the reaction, you have to remember where Drake started. Early in his career, especially in the Room for Improvement and So Far Gone era, his brand wasn't built around intimidation or street mythology. He positioned himself as a talented writer and vocalist, someone blending rap with R&B, navigating relationships, ambition, and ego with a confessional tone. That's why, when he began dropping lines that sounded like threats or implied violence, especially around the time of his second album, it caused whiplash. Listeners had watched him rise as a pop-leaning artist with a softer image, so when he suddenly hinted at people around him catching bodies, it didn't land as authentic to many people. The timing also made it feel like a strategic pivot, rather than an organic evolution. In a genre where realness used to be treated like a sacred rule, that kind of pivot is always risky. Even people who respect Drake's skills as a rapper have said the tough styling felt unnatural, like a costume he put on when the spotlight got hotter. From there, the imagery and language only escalated. We've seen Drake adopt drill-adjacent aesthetics, darker visuals, and bars that flirt with militant energy. And he's referenced being around street figures in ways that suggest protection, leverage, or power. The issue isn't that an artist can't tell stories or borrow tones. Hip-hop is full of persona building. The issue is that Drake's public narrative and his body language don't always align with that persona. When people already perceive you as a polished superstar who came up through entertainment pathways, you don't get the same benefit of the doubt as someone whose whole identity has always been tied to that environment. So every time Drake leans into the "I'm really like that" angle, critics treat it like theater instead of testimony. And that perception has been reinforced by moments where Drake's tough energy has been met with laughter or disbelief. When he slips into accents and slang that people associate with specific communities, especially after previously making jokes about them. It reads to some as opportunistic rather than natural. When he argues with someone on camera or tries to talk like a street boss in a public moment, the reaction often isn't Firett's memes. The underlying sentiment is basically, "We've seen who you are, and this doesn't match." That said, there's a different layer to the story that complicates things, even if people don't buy Drake as someone who personally lives that life. Many do believe he's built a circle where some members are very real about their backgrounds. In other words, the intimidation factor isn't Drake throwing punches, it's the idea that the people around him might. And there's a logic to why, when you're a global star, your orbit changes. You don't just keep the same handful of creative friends. You accumulate security, hangers-on, opportunists, loyalists, and sometimes individuals who treat your fame like their ticket out. That creates a dynamic where certain people might act reckless because they see the superstar as the source of their income, status, and access. If your lifestyle depends on staying close to the star, you might feel motivated to prove loyalty in extreme ways, especially when online narratives start calling the star soft. This is where Drake's tough image becomes less about him and more about the ecosystem around him. Over time, he's been linked directly or indirectly to figures who generate controversy, whether through their online behavior, past charges, public altercations, or reputation. Even if Drake never tells anyone to do anything, the association alone can shape public perception. It can also backfire, because when an enforcer figure behaves foolishly, gets embarrassed publicly, or makes wild threats online, it doesn't. Make Drake look scarier UI makes the whole operation look like cosplay with consequences. It's the worst of both worlds. The image becomes aggressive enough to invite criticism, but still unconvincing enough to invite ridicule. Then there's the repeated theme that, in conflicts, Drake often seems like the guy protected by others, rather than the one doing anything himself. Stories and rumors, fair or unfair, have followed him for years, suggesting he avoids direct confrontation, while people around him handle the messy part. That perception matters because hip-hop audiences don't just judge lyrics. They judge posture, reaction, and pattern. When an artist tries to talk like a street general but is repeatedly portrayed as someone who gets pressed and doesn't respond physically, the persona collapses. Whether those stories are exaggerated or selectively repeated, they become part of the myth people attach to him. And in the current era, that myth collides with another reality. Drake isn't just competing musically anymore, he's navigating public narratives in real time. Rap beefs, internet commentary, and media coverage can turn into a courtroom storyline. Brand management and strategic PR. When a rapper leans into war talk in songs and videos, but then appears to fight battles through legal filings and corporate pressure, people call it inconsistent. They see a gap between the aesthetics of danger and the realities of how power is exercised at Drake's level. That disconnect is why so many listeners say they don't want gangster Drake. They want the Drake who is honest about being a superstar with emotions, strategy, and a sharp pen. So is Drake not allowed to posture the way other rappers do? In truth, he's allowed. He does it all the time. The real issue is that audiences don't receive it the same way because his origin, story, and public presentation don't support it. And once a perception sets in, this guy is acting, it becomes incredibly hard to reverse. Every attempt to look tougher gets interpreted as overcompensation. Every association with intimidating people gets read as outsourcing toughness. Every visual loaded with weapons or aggressive symbolism becomes less intense and more try-hard. Ironically, the solution might be simpler than all the controversy suggests. Drake doesn't need to convince people he's a street legend to be respected. His greatest strength has always been his ability to make feelings sound expensive too, turn introspection into stadium music, and to rap with enough precision that even his critics have to admit he's talented. If he leaned into who he actually is, an elite entertainer, a skilled writer, a cultural chameleon, and a global brand, he wouldn't have to borrow hardness to feel powerful. Because at this point, the toughest thing Drake could do is stop performing toughness and let the music speak without the costume. The more he tries to be something he isn't, the more people cringe. But when he's fully himself, that's when he's most dangerous in. The only way that truly matters for an artist he becomes impossible to ignore.